What's going on, guys? It's Frito here for your Overwatch. The Invasion live stream reveal just occurred, and there's a few amazing things coming to the game and other things that I'm a little bit worried about. The first subject is not so exciting because they didn't show us too much, but indicated what we should expect the story mode co-op gameplay to be like, and very little bits and pieces of gameplay about it. So we're going to take a look at what we have. They talk about different enemy types, and there's going to be specific team compositions for the co-op story missions that are relevant to that area of the story. So obviously, characters that don't team up in the actual lore aren't going to be able to participate in certain missions, and others. At least that is going to be relegated towards the other modes that we'll talk about later. But some exciting things they talked about was different enemy types, where there might be like close range brawler characters that are lethal at close range, or artillery from a distance that you're going to have to send your tracer or someone to deal with. That could make for some pretty interesting gameplay, and especially having played so much Diablo 4 recently, having interesting mobs and the mechanics of that could go very far to make this fun, but they more so hinted at the things instead of explaining them too much. One thing that does look like it is a holdover from the talent trees that were eventually scrapped is small modifications on the characters. Don't get your hopes up for too much, but in the first story mission, there is going to be Torbjorn getting a turret that can freeze the enemies. So something a little bit interesting there. No word on whether they're going to have the Lucio doing extra damage to enemies as he boops them into the wall. I don't think things like that are being included. So very small bits and pieces of modifications to the characters to play in these story missions. But the enemy design does look interesting. And whether it's the graphics and the feel of this, I think it's going to feel good to play. And people really underrate how good Overwatch 2 and Overwatch 1, for that matter, felt. And there's some of the frozen turrets for the enemy, which will slow down the mobs. This starts to begin to feel like it deserves the PvE moniker for me, because PvE typically is talking in relation to RPG games or like horde-based games, not story campaigns typically, which is why I will not be calling this PvE. I will call it a story mission. And to that degree, the devs seem proud of what they have made, but a lot of the explanations come across a little bit like they're explaining to us what a story mode is. And there's been campaign games out for 50 years or something by this point, and we all kind of get the point. So it looks good. I think that it's going to be fine for what it is. Will people appreciate the price tag that's going to come along with it? It's going to be $15 in order to get access to the 3 missions, as well as enough currency for the battle pass to play these. I think you will have fun with these. I don't think you're going to regret your time in these story missions, because we did play an early version of this at BlizzCon so many years ago, and just having teamwork with a Overwatch team comp alone is quite interesting. It's just very sad that maybe a huge layer of the complexity is utterly stripped away to only have the bare bones story, which still is interesting for Overwatch fans who have been yearning for story for years and years at this point. Now, so we'll take a look at the last bit of footage here that they're going to be showing of the story missions. This is very similar to what we played back in 2019. Big boss guy that maybe has like weak points on him that you have to coordinate around to use cover and access. Each hero will have their own hero powers that you are familiar with from PvP. Lucio can wall ride, and you know the game feel is very good. Like shooting bots in this game actually feels great, I would say, and that's going to be maybe a surprising strong point that other campaign games often don't have the core mechanics that Overwatch has that made it so addicting to play for so many years. Now we're going to move on to talk about the event missions. The first one we're going to be getting is Underworld. Skipping right over the Rio thing. They show different turrets. This is Torbjorn's freezing turret, which is nice to see. Don't necessarily need to see all of the art. Next subject, we're going to talk about Underworld. This is a non-canon, I'm going to call it like a dungeon almost, or like a different mission, kind of like an upgraded version of the Archives missions we've had so long ago, where they don't show too much gameplay of this. I think a lot of this stuff they're trying to wait to surprise us with, but it's non-canon and is going to have modifiers on it week to week. So as you imagine with these kinds of missions, when they first come out, the player base really like rushes to them, plays it a lot, but as a week goes on, they're not so popular anymore, or especially like as the season goes on, a lot of these playlists aren't populated, especially like the second tier ones, the one that isn't the flagship campaign mode. This might not be as popular, or maybe it will be if it's as replayable as they say it is. They keep using that word. It's highly replayable. It's highly replayable. I think it depends on your definition of replayable. Like, are the archives missions replayable? Is Junkenstein replayable? Technically, right? Like, the training range is replayable if you just want to stay in the training range all day. But the thing that I do find interesting about this is the modifiers. So there's going to be different team comps for this specific mission, as well as modifiers on the enemies, which can make them interesting to revisit and try to get high scores in this mode. As well, I'm almost even more interested at this point of the non-canon story that they're going down. I sort of wish the other avenues they've sort of opened with like Quest Watch and stuff had its own game, you know, but this is the first version of that we're getting. And I wonder if this side non-canon storyline, which maybe has its own cosmetics or something, if that's going to be like a add-on to the battle pass, that would start to make this kind of interesting if it was all synergistic in that way. That's kind of the hopes I wish we had for Quest Watch this season. Perhaps they can lean more into that next season. So we'll see how highly replayable it actually is. Again, co-op missions, as long as they are somewhat advanced, and it seems based on their explanation that this one will be, but again, we got even less visuals of this than the co-op mission, the main story, which we have kind of already seen before in a few different ways. The next thing we'll talk about is the hero mastery missions, and we finally got to see a bit more depth on this. It's essentially what we assumed it to be, but does look fairly polished from a gameplay mechanic standpoint. So essentially what this is an advanced training range with challenge points that are specific to your given hero. So if you're Sojourn, you got to bypass a shield in order to land a headshot. Mercy is going to use Guardian Angel tech to fly through the sky, needing to pop her ultimate to clear this gap. And all of this is time-based, as well as having little pickups and extra modifiers to improve your score. So this, for sure, is highly replayable because it is so masterful. I really hope they go super advanced with it and require certain parts of it to say, like, utilize some max advanced tech, like the Winston triple hit. If you don't know, Winston's Primal Rage has the potential to hit 3 times essentially at once. The end of one primal swing, then into the land animation, which will cancel your primal swing into another one, and you can kind of chain that if you exactly land right at the end of your first swing. It's a very advanced tech that was kind of mastered over time from the higher level players, and that kind of stuff can actually translate to PvP performance. If a mode like this can train you to do some of these more advanced maneuvers, well, that can help a player learn the game as well as master the game at all levels of play in sort of a safe environment for you to practice around. I don't know if you noticed that, but in Winston's alternate fire there, it also had a little bit of a sort of chain effect where it changed to all the enemy mobs in the area. That looks to be another very likely type of passive or special skill tree modification that they would have scrapped from the original version of the game that they were setting out to make. So I look forward to more of those being added. Like, is that a buff they'll consider for Winston at some point? Is it something that's just in the campaign and non-PvP content right here where it's chaining to multiple enemies? We'll see. That can make it more interesting, right? The more things they add like this to spice up shooting the bots in any manner is going to add to the gameplay interest of the community, because they'll be able to experience something they've never really done before, have some OP thing that you just couldn't have in PvP. That was kind of one of the bigger excitement points for Overwatch 2, is that they could really go crazy with the hero talents. Well, now we're kind of getting a much diminished version of that, though. If you are a PvP player, certainly the hero missions will be appealing to you in the sense of really mastering your character. And to the point of mastering your character, we're going to now jump over to the player progression segment of the live stream, where Aaron Keller explained that they are adding what essentially is like Call of Duty challenges or prestige icons, player portraits, ways to unlock things for your heroes. And what you do is you play a hero in however way you enjoy playing it, whether you focus more on damage, shields more, or whatever. As you accrue stats on that given hero, you'll be able to get emblems for them. So as you can see now that this player Overwatch battle tag has kind of kitted out their player profile with different heroes that they play. And then within it, you can see the different challenges they have. And I would assume that some of these different colored emblems are like higher prestige, harder to get, take longer, more stats. I like this a lot, and it's something that I have specifically asked for years because so many players are invested into their player profile. So much so that they will play an entire competitive season just playing one hero just to see that one hero on the list with so many hours played and what they've accomplished on that hero. This gives something like that, but maybe a bit more for even just quick play players that maybe don't even want to put their rank on the line. Again, they didn't show too much of this. Replay it slightly here, but I think this is a good addition. I hope it looks kind of bare bone at the moment. A lot of the Overwatch 2 UI looks kind of simple. It's not as like flashy or clean, but some of it looks good. Like the art in the background, the emblems, they do look better than the rank icons at least. I think this can use a little bit of TLC to like upgrade over time, but it's certainly like a good start. I don't know if I'm like necessarily falling in love with looking at it necessarily, but it's something to build off of into the future, and certainly something that I will enjoy hopping into because that's a way that you can enjoy playing your heroes, especially in quick play, if you think you feel you need to play certain things in ranked, which is often the case. Like you can still get that sort of one-trick RPG experience playing outside of the competitive mode, which is kind of crucial, I feel, to have that as an option, because otherwise you're sort of stuck playing very low people will still do this obviously, but playing low viability heroes to get that same sort of itch. Now you can kind of satisfy that in a different way, and well, it's a good thing for all types of players, I feel. The next and last section is going to be about the new game mode, Flashpoint, which looks to be essentially just Hardpoint from Call of Duty. If you don't know how Hardpoint works, you've got a map, and then there's specific zones on the map that can activate like a headquarters or Hardpoint control point that you have to jump on, fight over, and then accrue objective progress on. This is typically, and as they've explained it, random across the map, which is going to have multiple effects for you to consider, but I want to talk about just like the layout of the game mode, how it's going to play in Overwatch 2 in general. I'm going to say that this adds a whole nother layer of chaos, and I think is going to be fun. Like push is sort of fun, but the problem with push is that it's also sort of solved, and people know how to sort of camp the map and not have to aggress into a position and can camp their lead and use ult economy. And so the meta of push kind of devolved a bit, whereas the meta of this mode, I hope, will force movement and actually handle a bit of a problem that Aaron Keller has been talking about recently. In Overwatch, getting stomped is very common because if your team comp is just a bad matchup for the enemy, or they gain a bit of an advantage, they snowball that advantage with more ults, more map positioning, etc. Now, having an RNG objective can be bad for competitive integrity in a way, because you can actually just guess wrong on where the next point is going. What you want to do in this kind of mode in Flashpoint is, as one objective point is beginning to rotate, you want to already get ahead and start getting some scouting and map control on the next one. So it's way more powerful to already have been on the objective ahead of time than it is to retake into space your enemy controls. So if you establish first, they have to rush into you, and then you sort of can camp the map a bit. So knowing the entire map layout, the likely spawn locations, and securing specific cutoff lanes and spawn locations is key to this kind of mode. But all that being said, it still is a little bit random sometimes, unless there's a set rotation. But the benefit of it being random is that maybe it can sort of equalize some of that snowball and stomp effect that happens in the game, because once in a while you'll be guaranteed a bit of an easy objective point, right? And then even if the enemy was stomping you, then you have an opportunity to be the defenders and kind of force more resources out of them as they take space into you, as opposed to a completely fair map, a completely fair push map, right? Is so based upon just ult economy and having the lead and camping the lead, right? This sort of flips that on its head a bit, where it's kind of just not possible to camp the lead. Obviously, having ultimate advantage is still a big advantage that you can leverage, but there's something to be said about defender's advantage as well, and this kind of adds that a little bit. Regardless, I think it's going to be a fun mode, because even in its worst light, I think push is just kind of a simple, fun mode. A lot of flanks, a lot of areas to fight in. It's user-friendly in a way, at least at a casual level, maybe kind of breaks down at higher levels of advanced gameplay. But this will be fun, I think, for everyone. Maybe just a little bit too challenging, though, because as opposed to other slower modes, you can kind of get away with playing in the team comp a bit. I mean, we're miles away from the assault game mode, which was all just about camping a position, right? Like on defense, that can feel incredibly easy. In some ways, you're going to have a gap between really hard fights and really easy fights in the RNG nature of how this map is going to rotate. But I think the maps look really good. Whether they're big or not, they're really impressed with how big they've made the maps. I'm not sure that matters to me necessarily, but what I do like is sort of the free-flowing nature of these maps, because I think you're going to feel like you have that opportunity to get into some of those really key mid-range type fights that feel so fun in Overwatch. I will say, you're going to have to just pre-guess the meta of these is going to heavily biased mobility-based characters, either flankers or really mobile supports like Kiriko, ones that can kind of just handle their own duel and don't need too much babysitting and moving around. Or if you do have heroes like that, maybe you can utilize the new Lifeweaver buffs in order to try to get some of those slower characters back into position. So I look forward to this mode. I don't believe they said if a mode is coming out of competitive rotation, if this just gets added in. I think players would be very upset if they removed anything at any point, right? So I just think they're not going to do that, but it's common in competitive games to only have a set number of maps in the pool, because otherwise it gets a bit overwhelming with all the different game types. But I think that more game types is good, because it helps smooth out the performance of a lot of heroes, where it gives them different map types to excel on. Now, if we're going to keep going down this road, I wonder if they'll ever add a more tactical style map, but I kind of doubt that, considering they went the other direction pretty hard so far in Overwatch 2 into more deathmatchy gameplay, which at the very least is more fun. It just is sometimes strategically limiting in some ways that makes me miss some aspects of Overwatch 1. But overall, I think these are really solid additions. I think the player base might sleep a little bit on some of the earlier progress that they've shown on like the hero progression. I will love that to death, because I've begged for that. I don't know if it's going to set the world on fire or solve the problems that players have been saying about the reward system. Like, is emblems going to do it for them? I mean, it's better than nothing, but all of this kind of is happening at like an awkward time where we know it's quite a letdown from the grand vision of the game, but we are getting more content. It's still going, guys. Like, the Overwatch dream still continues, and as a fan of the game, I'm happy to have more of anything, as opposed to them maybe canceling a game that I love. Like, so I'm happy with them making the tough decision to scale all of this back. I look forward to playing the story missions in co-op. I hope it's as fun as I imagine it to be, even with those major layers stripped out of it. If you liked this video, please be sure to leave it with a like, and don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos come out. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.